Here to begin with, as the Pandit Atisha has stated in his Lamp for the Path, he says, those who, through their own personal suffering, truly want to end completely all the suffering of others are persons of supreme capacity. So here we begin our sort of journey in this way of thinking by doing the sort of trainings and thinking, the way of thinking of a person of small capacity. So in the sort of being of small capacity, we think about escaping the suffering of the lower realms. And through understanding that, we then want to gain a higher rebirth. So here, describing the being of great capacity, a being who has developed bodhicitta through the understanding of their own suffering, their personal experience of suffering and the way that we suffer in samsara, they wish to liberate all others from that kind of state. So at the level of the being of small capacity, we first begin by seeing the sufferings of the lower realms, the sufferings of hell beings and hungry ghosts and animals, and wish to get freed from that. But at the being of middling capacity, when we sort of expand our mind out more, we see that such states are not ones of definite happiness. They are still in the nature of suffering. They're still within samsara. And so one begins to make an effort to get out of that, to get a kind of definite freedom from that cycle. But when one recognizes that kind of suffering in relation to oneself and then looks at other sentient beings and is unable to bear the suffering that they experience as well, this is the kind of thought of a being of great capacity, recognizing that all other beings are just like us in not wanting to suffer and wanting to have happiness. And not only that, but they have acted as like our mother and father, our good friends in this life, and shown us great kindness. So just freeing ourselves from our own suffering is not sufficient. It's not right. We don't want to abandon other sentient beings, but rather gain the capacity to lead others out of this state of suffering, of samsara, and place them in the great bliss of Buddhahood. So recognizing others as exactly like us through our own personal suffering, wanting to completely end the suffering of others, we make a kind of pledge to make effort over lifetimes, over eons, in order to be able to reach that goal. So this kind of great thought or great aspiration is something that comes from sequentially training, first by thinking about the sort of level of the small capacity of the sufferings of the lower realms, then expanding that to liberating oneself from samsara, and finally making it this extremely vast kind of mind of bodhicitta, expanding to all sentient beings and wanting to free them from suffering. So here, the foundation of bodhicitta is having love and compassion. And so love is that wish to have happiness, for others to have happiness. And compassion is the wish for others to be freed from their suffering. And when we have great compassion that expands to all sentient beings, we can then generate this kind of attitude of bodhicitta. But the real root of all of this, the foundation of generating these attitudes, is the kind of natural love and compassion that we have. We have this in relation to ourselves. Naturally, we don't have to think about it. We make effort innately to achieve those things that make us happy and to alleviate our suffering. And most of the time, the greatest love that we have is for ourselves. And we're really mostly limited to thinking just about this life. We don't usually think beyond that. We're just wanting to gain happiness in this life and alleviate our suffering in this life. And so, yes, we can have a kind of love and compassion that extends to our family, those that we are close to, our friends, and so forth. And there are even times when we can have these attitudes that arise spontaneously in relation to someone we don't know. We can have a feeling of like, oh, may they have happiness or may they be freed from suffering. But this is something that we need to develop and increase more and more. We can recognize that if we look at sort of the development of humanity, the sort of love and compassion beginning with the love and compassion for ourselves is what led us to develop like houses and communities and planting fields and so forth. We have worked in order to alleviate our sufferings of cold and the elements and not having a stable source of food and so forth. The kinds of things that we have developed, language, a way to be literate, these are all in order to achieve our happiness and alleviate our suffering. And so, in the past, we really saw our sort of direct relation connection with others in terms of like in Tibet, a family would do all of their work for themselves. They'd be planting the field and they would make their own clothing and their own shoes and so forth. Now, these days, we don't maybe do all of that work for ourselves, but we can see how the work of others is something that we are dependent on. We are connected to others. And it is with this sort of seed of love and compassion that we are able to generate these kinds of attitudes, and develop them more and more. Most of the time, though, even when we have a sort of love for ourselves, we want our happiness and we don't want to suffer, we don't make the right kind of effort. We don't actually know the things that we should be doing to achieve our happiness. So there's a verse in the Praise to Maitreya that we have love for ourselves, but we don't actually know how to get it properly. But bodhisattvas, they are wishing for they have the greatest compassion that wishes for a definite freedom for all sentient beings, not just wanting sort of trivial things in one life, but rather thinking much beyond that. So our normal sense of love and compassion is usually limited to ourselves and those that we are close to, and it's mostly directed at things that we can see, wanting to have sort of happiness in this life and alleviate our suffering. But if we take that seed, we can increase that and expand that and recognize that all beings need love and compassion. And it's not just for this life, but we have to give up this life. We might think that this is all that there is, but really our mental continuum will go into future lives. We've already gone through many lives casting off our aggregates and taking up new ones. And we have actually had many relations in the past with all of these various beings. We've gone through good things and bad things, but we are able to, if we have this sort of long-term view, recognize the importance of developing, expanding, and increasing these attitudes of love and bodhicitta until we are able to have the kind of attitude that wishes love and compassion, until we are able to generate this attitude of bodhicitta. So this is wishing then that we are able to achieve this state of Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. And this is something, again, that we develop through training sequentially our mind and until we get to the point of that wish to achieve the state of Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And in order to do that, we need to hear the Dharma, contemplate the Dharma, and meditate on it. And so with this sort of motivation, we should set our minds, our intention for listening to these teachings with that kind of bodhicitta attitude. So here, in terms of what we have gone through in the text, we have been discussing how it is that bodhisattvas need both method and wisdom. They need to have both of these in order to progress to the state of Buddhahood. It's not sufficient to just train in the wisdom side. One needs to have love and compassion and bodhicitta, and that kind of view striving for the aims, the welfare of other sentient beings. If one is just training in the wisdom side, in coming to a realization of emptiness and so forth, one will be making effort at quickly gaining one's own liberation. And so that kind of leads one, that solely training in the wisdom side leads one to fall into the extreme of peace, because one is striving to, is really creating the causes to eradicate one's afflictions, but not that obscuration to omniscience. So one is able to eliminate the afflictions, but one just cultivating wisdom will fall into the peace of nirvana. One needs to have the method side in order to avoid that kind of extreme. And one also can't just have the method side of the practice, but one also needs to make an effort at the this direct realization of emptiness. So long as one is lacking that, one will be under the control of our various afflictions and won't even be able to achieve one's own liberation. One will remain as an ordinary being that is still in this extreme of samsara, subject to cycling because one is under the control of those afflictions. One will accumulate karma and thereby be propelled to future birth. So without the wisdom directly realizing emptiness, one is not able to become a superior being, a superior or an Arya. It's no longer under the control of the afflictions, grasping at a self and so forth, such that they're no longer creating karma and no longer an ordinary being. So here, it is necessary for bodhisattvas to then practice both method and wisdom conjoined together. So here, as far as a basis for this assertion, there is this sutra that is cited. It gives various sort of sources for this, but going back a little ways to the quotation from the heap of Arya of Jules Arya Sutra, it gives this example of how a bodhisattva, this is actually from the 10 qualities Arya Sutra. I was in the wrong place. Here, this is giving the example of like someone, if you're really cold, you would seek out fire. Fire is the best remedy to be able to heat yourself up. If you're really cold, you recognize the value of that fire and you respect the fire's ability to give you heat. But as it says here in this example, for instance, a person who is thoroughly actually it comes a little bit before the quotation there, but it says that, so wisdom separated from skillful means is bondage for bodhisattvas. Therefore, just as a person chilled by the wind seeks the comfort of fire, so a bodhisattva cultivates the wisdom of emptiness along with skillful means to eliminate the wind of wrong view. But he does not endeavor to actualize it as the hearers do. So here, and then it comes with a quotation from the 10 qualities Arya Sutra. So someone can have a great deal of respect for fire, but they aren't going to go and grab it with both hands. That's going to get them burned. And so too, when it comes to a bodhisattva, they recognize the value of liberation, of getting out of samsara, and they want to get out of samsara, but they don't see that as something that is to be actualized as quickly as possible, because for them, the primary thing that is to be removed is the obscurations to omniscience, these knowledge obscurations, and they want to bring their knowledge, their wisdom to its completion in order to be able to benefit other sentient beings. So for them, the idea of benefiting others, of working for the welfare of others, is more important than immediately, quickly obtaining their own liberation. So this sort of out of prayers and aspirations, bodhisattvas remain out of compassion in their prayers within samsara in order to benefit other sentient beings. And so here, there is, for bodhisattvas, a general desire to get out of samsara, but they recognize that that's not the main kind of goal. They're mainly focused on removing the kind of knowledge obscurations and being able to benefit other sentient beings. So there is, in this process of going through the various paths, they don't need to first remove all of the afflictive obscurations. You can actually get to a point where you remove the afflictive and the knowledge obscurations at once. But they're mainly focused, again, on removing those knowledge obscurations and are not trying to manifest or actualize nirvana as quickly as possible. For them, that would be like grabbing onto fire. So if one is to actualize in nirvana, that negates the ability, that means that one's not prioritizing the kind of working to free others. So here, bodhisattvas are trying to actualize this non-abiding nirvana, wherein they are neither abiding in the extreme of peace, like hearer and solitary realizer arhats, nor are they within samsara in the sense of being under the control of their various afflictions. So here again, this is describing how it is that a bodhisattva is aware of nirvana, but is not trying to actualize it. As it says in this quotation, this is because he realizes that by doing so, he would be turning away from full awakening. So a bodhisattva is striving for this non-abiding nirvana, free from either extreme of peace or samsara. So here then, continuing with what it means to have a union of method and wisdom, here it's explained that when one is in this kind of meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness, one doesn't have the method side directly, as in one doesn't have a thought of love and compassion at that moment of being in meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness. But at the time of sort of preparation, or when one is preparing to go into that meditation, one is going in with the intention or motivation of, I'm going to meditate on emptiness for the sake of other sentient beings. And so at the time of sort of setting an intention or going into that meditative equipoise, one has this union of calm abiding and special insight. Although directly, when one is in meditative equipoise, we can't talk about there being a sort of manifest method side. But then in the periods of post-meditation, in the subsequent kind of attainment periods, one can also have this union by recognizing that all is illusion-like, that it doesn't actually exist as it appears, but all of our roots of virtue are going to be dedicated for the benefit of other sentient beings. And so here, when one is in those sort of non-meditative periods, one can be thinking about emptiness and thinking about love and compassion and so forth, and it's easier to see the sort of union of calm abiding and special insight. But while in meditative equipoise, one is only directly realizing emptiness. We can't speak of it as sort of manifest method side. So then we turn to a description of the kind of benefits that come from this practice. And so here, these were, some of them were described. We had gone through some of them in the Pure Field of Engagement Arya Sutra. And so here, this describes how those who become familiar with compassion, skillful means, and the awakening mind of bodhicitta in this way will undoubtedly excel in this life. So you'll have successes in this life. And also it says that Buddhas and bodhisattvas will always be seen in dreams, and other pleasant dreams will occur. So again, when it comes to what we dream about at night, it's really primarily based upon what we think about most during our waking hours. So if we are thinking about Buddhas and bodhisattvas, thinking about the teaching of the Dharma and so forth, then we're likely to see those in our dreams as well. And it says appreciative gods will protect you. So here, again, when one has this sort of attitude and is kind toward others, you are generally liked by those like these kinds of appreciative gods, as it's translated here. And so these are some of the benefits that we had gone through last time of this kind of practice. So again, going through these benefits, there are benefits that we get in this life that were described above, like having much happiness and mental peace and being free from disease and so forth. And then we turn to where we had left off, which looks at sort of our future lives. So it says, at the time of death, too, you will undoubtedly see Buddhas and bodhisattvas. So here, again, if we have trained our mind in this way, and we have developed this kind of attitude of respect and faith in Buddhas and bodhisattvas, then in our future lives, including at the time of our death, we will be able to see Buddhas and bodhisattvas. And then in future lives, you will be reborn in special families and places where you will not be separated from Buddhas and bodhisattvas. So we're creating the kind of causes to, in our future births, be born in realms, these kind of special realms or fields where the Buddhas have actually come and taught, where there is the Dharma, where we have this sort of ability to continue to practice the Dharma. And so it says, thus you will effortlessly accomplish all accumulations of merit and wisdom. And so here we have, when one has created these kinds of seeds, it will allow you to continue continue to make effort at these at method and wisdom, or the sort of kindness side and our learning. And in that way, all of our activities can become virtuous, as had been discussed before. When a bodhisattva develops this kind of uncontrived bodhicitta, all of their activities then, whether they're like playing around or they're sleeping, become virtuous. And so here again, there is this kind of, we need to think long term. Bodhisattvas accumulate merit for countless eons. And so too, we should strive with this kind of attitude of continuity, of gaining good conditions in the future to be able to continue to accomplish these practices. So continuing, it says, you will have great wealth, a large following, and many attendants. So having all of these kinds of conducive conditions that allow us to continue to practice. And possessing a sharp intelligence, you will be able to ripen the mind streams of many beings. In all lives, such a person will be able to recall past lives, to try to understand the immeasurable advantages that are also described in other sutras. So again, there are great benefits that come from these practices, being able to remember past lives and so forth. But this is a continuity. We are trying to continue this practice by having these good results in this life and in future lives, continuing to increase and develop more and more. So here then it says, in this way, if you meditate on compassion, skillful means, and the awakening mind of bodhicitta for a long time with great admiration, the mind stream will gradually become thoroughly purified and ripened. So when one has this kind of attitude of bodhicitta, and again, when one first generates bodhicitta, one enters into what we call the path of accumulation, and then through gradual development reaches the path of preparation. But those levels of bodhisattvas, they have this attitude of bodhicitta, but they have not yet directly realized emptiness, and therefore they're still ordinary beings. At the point of the path of seeing, wherein a bodhisattva has a direct realization of emptiness, that is simultaneous with attaining the first ground, the first superior ground. And it is through then proceeding through those various grounds that they will purify all of the various kinds of stains in their mind stream, and so it says their mind stream will gradually become thoroughly purified and ripened. And it is then here we're sort of discussing the kinds of benefits that come of achieving this first ground of becoming an Arya being. And so when one through this process, it says here, like producing fire by rubbing together pieces of wood, you will accomplish your meditation on the perfect reality. And so this continues by explaining that you will thus achieve an extremely clear knowledge of the sphere of phenomena, free from conceptual elaborations, the transcendental wisdom free of the impending nets of conceptual thought. So here, this is the kind of, is describing the wisdom of ultimate bodhicitta. And so the wisdom realizing selflessness, directly realizing emptiness, is what we refer to as ultimate bodhicitta. So when one has had the motivation, has the intention to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings, when one is having that sort of thought, that thought itself is conventional bodhicitta. But the mind directly realizing emptiness in a being who has generated such a motivation is referred to as ultimate bodhicitta. And so here, this is again sort of holding the body of the Buddha, or the state of Buddhahood, as a goal that one wants to attain, and actively having that thought of, I want to attain that for the sake of all sentient beings. This is what we would refer to again as conventional bodhicitta. But that direct realization of emptiness, which is actually observing the sort of nature body of a Buddha, and will result in that truth body of a Buddha, this is the what we refer to as ultimate bodhicitta. And so it says then, the wisdom of ultimate bodhicitta is stainless, like an unwavering butter lamp disturbed by the wind. Thus, such a mind is in the entity of ultimate bodhicitta is included within the path of seeing, which apprehends the selfless nature of all phenomena. Through this achievement, you enter into the path focusing on the reality of things, and you are then born in the family of Tathagatas. You enter the stainless state of a bodhisattva, turn away from all wandering births, abide in the suchness of bodhisattvas, and attain the first bodhisattva ground. And so here, again, this is sort of summarizing the benefits that one attains with the attainment of the first ground. And so one turns away from all wandering births, all samsaric births, and abides in this suchness of bodhisattvas. And this is the point at which one has attained an Arya path and the first ground. Here, then again, this it continues by saying, again, we've gone through the sort of benefits that come from having attained the first ground. And this is explained in more detail so we can find the details, more details of these advantages, the benefits that we see of attaining the various grounds in other texts, such as the 10 spiritual levels. So this is how meditative stabilization focusing on suchness is taught in the Descent into Lanka Arya Sutra. And this is how bodhisattvas enter the non-conceptual meditation free from elaborations. So here again, this is taught and explained that one progresses sequentially through these stages, and we can look to these sources for more detail. It continues here by explaining that those in the engaging through aspiration level are said to engage through thought and not through pure application. Once that wisdom is evolved, one enters this level. So those in the engaging through aspiration level, this is referring to those bodhisattvas who are still on the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. These are aspirational levels because they don't yet have a direct realization of emptiness. They know only through a kind of conceptual mode the meaning of emptiness. And at the point of the path of seeing, wherein one has this direct realization of emptiness, then one enters into that path of seeing and simultaneously attains the first ground. And so in this way, then it continues sequentially by explaining the kind of benefits of the path of meditation, wherein one then proceeds to go through the second, third, fourth, and so on grounds. And so it says then, once that wisdom is evolved, as in one has had a direct realization, one enters the level of the path of seeing. And then once one has achieved the path of seeing in the first ground, in this way, a person who has entered the first level later on the path of meditation familiarizes him or herself with the two wisdoms of the transcendental state and the subsequent wisdom and skillful means. In this way, he gradually purifies the subtlest accumulation of obscurations that are the object of the path of purification of the path of meditation. So again, this is something where one is developing one's method and wisdom more and more, such that one is subsequently sort of in sequence eliminating the more and more subtle kind of obscurations that are to be eliminated on each of the various grounds, all the way up until Buddhahood, when one has eliminated the kind of obscurations of the 10th ground and then attains omniscience. And so this is something that is done in stages. So again, in order to achieve higher qualities, he thoroughly purifies the lower spiritual level. All purposes and objectives are completely fulfilled by entering the transcendental wisdom of the Tathagatas and by entering the ocean of omniscience. In this way, by gradual practice, the mind stream is thoroughly purified. So the Descent into Lanka Arya Sutra gives an explanation of this. And this is also explained, as will come below, in the Unraveling of the Thought Sutra. And again, here, when one achieves a direct realization of emptiness, one no longer has in one's meditative equipoise any kind of appearances, conventional appearances or appearances of true existence. And then from that point, one is going to proceed in stages through the various grounds and through the path of meditation and the path of no more learning and so forth, to remove more and more subtle kind of obscurations until one reaches enters the ocean of omniscience. And so as the quotation from the Unraveling the Thought it reads, it says, in order to achieve those higher levels, the mind should be purified just as you refine gold until you realize the unsurpassed, complete, perfect awakening. So this is something that needs to be done in stages. In the way one purifies gold, one proceeds by doing certain steps in a sequence in order to get to that refined kind of gold. And so too, when it comes to complete unsurpassed, complete, perfect awakening, one needs to proceed in stages. And here, the last section of this is describing kind of the benefits of Buddhahood, the benefits of omniscience.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so here, then again, it's sort of making a plea for us to make an effort at this. So it says here, describing kind of the qualities of omniscience, of attaining Buddhahood. It is encouraging us to make effort at this. If you continue to develop these kinds of qualities, then one is able to eventually attain the state of Buddhahood. So it says here, entering the ocean of omniscience, you possess impeccable jewel-like qualities to sustain sentient beings, and these fulfill your previous prayers. So if one attains the state of Buddhahood, Buddhas are like a wish-fulfilling jewel. They are working solely for the benefit of sentient beings. And so like the way that if you would make a prayer or wish for something on this sort of magical wish-fulfilling jewel, and it would give you whatever you wanted, so too with bodhisattvas. They are working solely for the benefit of other sentient beings. And so the results that come from this attitude of wishing to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings includes this, that the individual then becomes the embodiment of compassion, possessing various skillful means that function spontaneously and work in various emanations in the interests of all wandering beings. So here, the individual becomes this embodiment of compassion, working for sentient beings, like working in accordance with the various needs of sentient beings. We have different dispositions, and there are certain things that are proper for different types of beings. And Buddhas, then once they have achieved this state, no longer need to have any sort of the coarse kind of effort that we would have to make in order to work for others or do things that are beneficial, but rather have this kind of spontaneous type of skillful means. And they work in various emanations in the interests of wandering beings. So again, this is something that's describing the kind of and I'll just continue by saying that, reading the text, that in addition, all marvelous attributes are perfected with total elimination of defilements and their latencies. All Buddhas abide to help every sentient being. So a Buddha is one who has perfected all of these qualities, perfected his or her knowledge such that they know everything that is to be adopted and abandoned, all the sort of mode and variety of phenomena. They have perfected their love, brought it to its sort of full completion, as well as their ability. And their ability is being able to help beings in accordance with their needs. They teach in ways that are suitable to various vessels. Again, it's described like we can, if we don't have a sort of faith in the Buddha's teachings, or we don't have the proper kinds of disposition to be benefited by it, it's like if you have a hook, but you have no sort of hole for that to catch onto. We need to have a way to connect with the Buddha's teachings properly, having this kind of faith from our side, or also sort of have a proper disposition to be able to benefit from that particular teaching. And so here, again, with this regard to with total elimination of all defilements and their latencies. So here, when one has eliminated the afflictive obscurations, there are still sort of those latent tendencies that are our obscurations to omniscience, those knowledge obscurations. And those can be removed. And once we have removed those kinds of imprints, then one attains the full awakening of Buddhahood. And so this, again, is referring to the fact that they have gotten rid of not just the defilements of various afflictions, but also any latent tendencies, and have this ability then to benefit every sentient being, having perfected these qualities of wisdom, love, ability, and so forth. And so it says, through such realization, generate faith in the Buddhas, the source of all wonderful knowledge and qualities. Everyone should endeavor to actualize these qualities. So reflecting on the various qualities of the Buddhas, one should generate faith, generate this kind of understanding that this is something that we would want to attain. And it's having that sort of admiring faith, and as well as the sort of striving faith that says, I want to attain that for myself or attain that for others, that leads us to really make an effort in these things. And so based upon seeing these qualities, everyone should endeavor to actualize them. And so in summary, the Buddha thus said, the omniscient transcendental wisdom is produced with compassion as its root, the awakening mind of bodhicitta as its cause, and is perfected by skillful means. So great compassion, this compassion wishing to free all sentient beings from their sufferings, acts as like the root, the cause then of one's striving to develop this transcendental wisdom, is this awakening mind of bodhicitta. And it's brought to its completion by skillful means. When one strives for a direct realization of emptiness held by that kind of love and compassion for sentient beings, this is then brought to completion. One attains the state of Buddhahood. So then we have here a kind of a verse that says, the wise distance themselves from jealousy and other stains. Their thirst for knowledge is unquenchable like an ocean. Those who are wise should distance themselves from anything like any kind of stains, especially some sort of like jealousy of being jealous of the qualities of others. And rather, they should have this kind of thirst for knowledge that is unquenchable, in the way that no matter how much water you add to an ocean, its thirst is never quenched. And so here it continues saying, they retain only what is proper through discrimination, just like swans extracting milk from water. So here it said that swans are able to just take up the milk. Even if milk and water are mixed together, they can just extract the milk. And so thus, scholars should distance themselves from divisive attitudes and bigotry. Here, they don't get sort of, a bodhisattva doesn't get caught up in their own aims. They're doing these kinds of practices, extracting the essence with this sort of attitude of altruism, of wanting to benefit others. And then even from a child, good words are received. So here we should have a sort of discrimination that allows us to see what is good advice, even if the speaker is an ordinary being, or even if the speaker is a child. If what they are saying is correct, is logical, then we should accept it. We shouldn't sort of fall into divisiveness or just thinking like, oh, this is right because it's my side, this kind of bigotry and divisive attitudes, but rather recognize that even from a child, good words are received. And then it turns to a dedication that says, whatever merit I derive with exposition of this middle path, I dedicate for all beings to actualize the middle path. So here again, this is making a dedication with this aspiration of bodhicitta, saying that whatever sort of merit I have derived from explaining this kind of path, may it go toward all sentient beings being able to actualize that path. And here then in the colophon, it says, the middle section of the stages of meditation by Acharya Kamaleshila is here completed. So there's a sort of preliminary, the middle, and then there's a final one. And this was translated and edited in Tibetan by the Indian abbot Prajna Verma and the monk Geshe Day. And then we have the kind of English translation that follows. So this then completes the text of Kamaleshila's middle stages of meditation. And this again was originally taught by Kamaleshila, given by Kamaleshila in order to argue against the kind of view of Hashang Mohoyen that would say that really the way that we get out of our suffering is just by not engaging mentally, by sort of stopping any kind of mental engagement or our mental activity. And that's how we're able to be freed from our afflictions and our suffering. So here, we all have this kind of sense of an I or a self, something that is like autonomous, set up from its own side. And based upon that sense of like a real I that exists in its own right, we hold that I as important and so forth. And we sort of engage in various karmas. Now, there are some various sort of tenet holders, philosophical thinkers that are convinced that there is such a self, something that is like a permanent soul or self within our various aggregates. Although, again, that's something that is refuted with various logic. But once we have this sense of I, like an autonomous, a really existing I, there comes with that a sense of mine. And we think about like my side, my family, my things, and so forth. And it is this kind of thinking that leads us to then engage in various karma. We give rise to afflictions and we create karma. So when we interact with external objects, we see that they give rise to our various kinds of afflictions. And so in order to remove our attachment and hatred, the sort of reactions that we have to those objects. Again, Hashang's theory is that we just, all of those afflictions come from mental activity. And so if we were to just not think of anything at all, if we were to just cease mental activity, then we could stop all of our various afflictions. They would just sort of like expire or be gone because they don't have any sort of objects to interact with. So this kind of view takes it that, well, if we want to remove our various afflictions, all we have to do is just sort of mentally disengage. But that's not really how we are able to eliminate our various afflictions. When we begin to, we actually have to use our conceptuality in order to come to a proper kind of understanding, an understanding that will undermine the way that we normally grasp at things as truly existent. So phenomena, objects, ourselves appear to us as though they were really truly existent, like from their own side, as if there's something that we could point to as being that thing, whether it is ourself or any other kind of object, something that's like not dependent upon our mentally labeling it, or not dependent on our parts, on its parts, and so forth. And so if it were the case that objects existed in this way, then it wouldn't be possible, as we see is the case, that people would have different views of one object. Sometimes people see one thing as pleasant, like some people will view a person as their friend, and others will view that same person as an enemy. And so it's not the case that something can exist from its own side, in its own right, in that way, when we see that it's not perceived the same by all parties. So here we have this strong sense that things are that things are truly existent, but when we search for such a thing, we can't find it. That doesn't mean, though, that phenomena as dependent originations are not existent. We have these dependent originations. Things come about, they're functional and so forth, but they don't exist in the way that they appear to us. So we have this kind of sense that, like, especially when it comes to ourself, that are like our own aggregates, there's got to be a self somewhere in that. We look through like our various components, and it seems like, well, our flesh and our blood and our bones, this thing is really truly existent like that. But when we begin to and we experience suffering and so forth on the basis of these aggregates that we have taken up, but when we begin to examine and really try to search for the thing as it appears to us, we find that we can't actually locate such a thing. And so here, this kind of conceptual thinking, this kind of analysis and investigation is necessary to come to the proper kind of understanding of emptiness that's able to undermine our suffering in the way that just mentally stopping activity is unable to. So here, then one needs to have then the method side. One needs to engage in the practices of generosity and ethics and patience and meditative concentration and so forth in order to reach the kind of result that we are striving for. So here, we have to recognize the level of these two truths, that although phenomenon, like say beings, do not exist as they appear, suffering beings do exist. It's not as though these kind of suffering beings are totally non-existent. It's just that things like various objects don't exist as they directly appear to us, but we can speak about there being harm and benefit, that things have functionality, that cause and effect is still functional. And so here, when it comes to the kind of engagement with the method side, this acts as the cause for our attaining the form body of a Buddha. And so here, the fact that things conventionally exist, and based on that conventional existence, are various practices of generosity and ethics and so forth, are what act as the kind of cause for the form body of a Buddha. And then the side of the fact that things don't actually exist in the way that they appear to us, the fact that when we search for something, whatever kind of object it is, we can't actually find that thing within its basis of designation. We can't point to anything that actually exists in the way that it appears to us. This is the kind of ultimate level of truth. And so we need both of these together. We often talk about there being the sort of basis, the path, and the result. And the foundation, the basis that of practice is these two truths, conventional and ultimate. And conventional truth kind of aligns with the method side of the path. So again, the sort of basis, we have the two truths, and then the path, one has method and wisdom. And so here, again, based upon a proper understanding of the two truths, one doesn't, when you say here that there's no form and no sound and no smell and so forth, one doesn't think that those things are totally non-existent. So one doesn't therefore give up this method side. One definitely needs to engage in this. So we need both truths and both method and wisdom. Again, the method kind of side is something as well as the wisdom side, but the method side in terms of love and compassion, these are things that we already have as qualities, but we need to increase them and develop them more and more. And so again, when it comes to this foundation, it's an understanding of the presentation of the two truths, ultimate and conventional. And then on the path, the way that one actually engages is through the practices of method and wisdom. And so here, the sort of method side acknowledges that there are suffering beings who conventionally exist. And there's also a way to alleviate that kind of suffering that beings experience. If it were the case that things were just totally non-existent, then why would one be making this kind of effort? So based upon that proper understanding of the foundation or the basis, one engages in these two, the paths of method and wisdom, which results in these two Buddha bodies. So when we talk about the resulting Buddha body, they are described as being abiding in pure lands with sort of all of these excellent qualities, all of these excellent characteristics, the various marks and signs on a Buddha's body. And this is something that needs to have the proper kind of cause to come about. So even when we talk about like external things, there are very varying levels of quality of various objects. Things can be well made or not well made, and it's really based upon the kind of causes that went into that. So when we are talking about the sort of most excellent, marvelous results of Buddhahood, of this being who has developed fully all good qualities, this is something where they have to train in all of these causes in order to actualize that result. Unlike an arhat, who once they have eliminated their afflictive obscuration, sort of like disappear into this sort of meld into the sphere of phenomena, a bodhisattva is actively working for the benefit of others. There is the sort of side of the Buddha's truth body. There minds being free from all kinds of lack of knowledge and from all of their afflictions, that directly knows all points to be adopted and abandoned, that kind of purity of mind, that is developed through the cause of wisdom. And then we have the sort of form body, the excellent form that a Buddha shows, that a Buddha displays to other sentient beings in order to bring about their benefits. And this can be accompanied by like having a pure realm and a pure entourage or retinue and so forth. And if we want to achieve those, one then needs to train in the proper causes, which means that we need both method and wisdom. So the Buddha came to the world and taught these four truths, four nobles, or the four noble truths, that all this is suffering and so forth, and that suffering has a cause, and all that the cause of suffering can be eliminated, and so forth. And so the Buddha has taught all of this in a way that accords with reality. All that the Buddha has taught is backed by logic. And so one of the main sort of logical points is that everything is dependent upon causes and conditions. So our abode, our sort of habitat, our various possessions, our body, all of these things arise from previous causes. It's not as though we accept like some kind of creator God. If that were the case, that gods could just create things for us, we wouldn't have to make effort at anything. It wouldn't be, they could just like make cups and this and that, and we wouldn't have to sort of make any effort. But it's not the case that there is some sort of creator God that can just bring things into existence, but rather all that we experience, so our body, the environment that we are in, our suffering, our happiness, all of these things arise from causes and conditions. So the experiences that we have when we do good things, when we create positive causes, that is going to lead to happiness. And when we do negative actions, we're going to create suffering. So this is something that we can see directly for ourselves when we make effort at something and we do so with a kind of a positive motivation. We're able to like see in this life that we gain benefits from that. So this is something where when we make effort and develop various qualities, we can see that we are able to develop those kinds of qualities, and also that there's a correspondence between causes and results. When we do good things, if we put sort of good effort into something, we will get good results from that. And so even though it is the case that we can see the results in this life, this extends beyond that. We have to give up this body, but our mental, our consciousness will continue, and the continuity of that will have imprints that we have created in this life. And so this, as the Buddha has taught, all compounded phenomena are impermanent and based upon causes and conditions. And so this is important that we recognize that this isn't just sort of like the Buddha felt like saying this or something, but it actually accords with reality. And so the Buddha has taught this sort of basis, this basic kind of truth to us in order that we might be able to affect change for ourselves. Because there is the fundamental factor that our minds are changeable, that because our minds are in the nature of clear light, and all of the kinds of stains, our various afflictions of anger and jealousy and hatred and attachment and so forth, are adventitious. They are not in the nature of mind, but rather are sort of temporary. They're conditions that we are able to get rid of. And we can develop these kinds of positive qualities of love and compassion more and more until we are able to bring them to the sort of completion. And we are also able to develop our knowledge of phenomena more and more until we are able to actually get at the kind of nature of things. So this, in this way, the Buddha has taught in this unerring kind of way the basis, the path, and the result that comes about. And it's, again, it's shown to us such that we will make an effort at the proper kinds of causes, because we have the capacity to change and develop our mind, but it's really up to us to make that sort of effort at developing the causes that will lead to those results. Sorry for that little interruption. So here, the Buddha's coming to the world is something that is extremely rare. Again, the Buddha came to the world not just to sort of like tell us a story, but to give instructions and advice to show us through his direct realization this kind of knowledge that accords with reality. And so the Buddha coming to the world, there are times, eons, where that is something that doesn't happen. And the Buddha having come and taught this pure Dharma, the profound and extensive Dharma, there are very many stages of this, but we should recognize how fortunate of an opportunity it is that we have been able to encounter such teachings as this, as they are so rare. And this is something, again, where we may not be able to take it all into practice all at once, but we have the sort of seeds. We have the seeds of love and compassion that we can develop such that it extends to all sentient beings. We have the seeds of wisdom such that we can eliminate all kinds of obscurations to knowledge, that we can get rid of all of our ignorance. And so again, even if we don't do this all at once, this is something that we are able to do through our own kind of development over time. There's a verse that Je Lama Tsongkhapa has said that we are able, we investigate what the Buddha has said with our own wisdom, looking at how things are impermanent and suffering and so forth. We are able then, through our own practice, to develop these kinds of understandings. So we have, it's not about just sort of learning the words of the Buddha, but rather recognizing that these are things to be implemented, that they're actually beneficial for us if we put them into practice. And so the Buddha, again, didn't sort of teach poetry or something else that's like a story, but rather things that we need to ourselves put into practice. And so first, we should, again, recognize the extreme fortune that we have to have encountered the teachings of the Buddha and the words of the Buddha. And make a kind of aspiration that whatever it is that we're not able to put into practice now, that we have the ability to do so in the future, with this kind of faith in both our fortunate situation, our ability to change, and a kind of long-term thinking. We should think, may I develop all of these qualities that I have not yet developed? May I develop them in this life, or if not in this life, in a future life, and have this kind of resolve to pursue this path lifetime after lifetime. So here, I would just like to say how impressed I am by everything that happens there at the Abbey, all of the kind of practice and prayers and study that you do. This is something that is really incredible, and I rejoice in it. And I would just like to say that some of the teachings that I've given are for the sake of those who might be listening who are newer to this. So sometimes we don't get something on the first hearing, but when we hear it again, we are able to understand, or maybe on the second hearing, we don't get it, but on the third hearing, we're able to understand that. So just kind of having a recognition that some of these teachings are given for those who might be newer to the Dharma, and in order to benefit them by this kind of repeated exposure to things. And so this is such a fortunate opportunity to be able to practice the Dharma. And again, I would just like to stress that this is really about the kind of greatness of the Dharma. Again, when we are normally sort of prostrating to a teacher, it's really explained that we're prostrating to the Dharma. Like one is making a prostration to that throne, as it represents the kind of greatness of the Dharma. And the Dharma is, again, something that can be sort of stated fearlessly because it accords with reality. And so I would just like to say that if there are any sort of mistakes, I don't remember things as well as I used to. And side note, as the translator is also potentially makes mistakes. But to all of you who the nuns and the Sangha there, Venerable children, to all of those who have listened, I would just like to rejoice in what has happened and rejoice in this auspicious kind of fortunate circumstances that we have had. This has made me really happy to do these teachings, and I rejoice.